For as long as I can remember, I was a Star Wars fan. I may even have been a Star Wars fan before I ever saw the movies. I had all of the action figures from the first movie, and many from the second and third. I had Star Wars bed sheets. I went out for trick-or-treating as Luke Skywalker. When I finally did see the movies, I saw them over and over again. In 1991, when Timothy Zahn followed Alan Dean Foster into expanding the Star Wars universe into novels with his Heir to the Empire trilogy, I soaked up those too. Splinter of the Mind's Eye, Heir to Empire, Truce at Bakura, I, Jedi, Rogue Squadron, and on and on. And it was fans like myself that kept the legacy of Star Wars alive during the many years of drought that George Lucas, in his callous genius, put us through. It gave Star Wars the most rabid fandom that Hollywood could ever have dreamt of. It was 1977 when George Lucas first took us to a galaxy far, far away to watch a young farm boy named Luke Skywalker be thrust into the galactic struggle between the Empire and the rebellion of Old Republic holdouts and rogues, the Sith and the remnants who still held out hope that there was still such a thing as the Jedi. We saw him meet Han Solo, a cool smuggler out for his own, who eventually discovered the hero within himself, even as he watched Luke blossom into his own hero. And we meet the alluring Princess Leia, one of the leaders of the Rebel Alliance, resisting the iron boot of the Empire. The 1970s were a glum, grim time in movies, where many heroes were not so much heroes as they were anti-heroes. Your Paul Kerseys and Harry Callahans and John Shafts. They were grim guys going about dealing with even grimmer bad guys. Star Wars came along and injected a little hope into theaters again. With Empire Strikes Back in 1980, it almost seemed a different man had written the movie. It was darker, grimmer, almost like something from the last decade's filmscape. The plucky rebels were in trouble. Han and Leia were separated from their troops and captured. Luke was off in the swamps going through basic training with a diminutive, curmudgeonly drill sergeant of a Master Jedi. And when he decided to run off to save his friends after the Force allowed him to see they were in trouble, said curmudgeon told him he was making a mistake. Which he was. And it cost him his hand and his trust in his mentor, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Return of the Jedi in 1983 returned to the more upbeat Star Wars of the first movie. The optimism was back. They find Han, take out Jabba the Hutt, and head towards a showdown with the Emperor once more. Luke's side quest back to Yoda winds up being a bit of a bummer when the old curmudgeon dies and, before he becomes one with the Force, tells Luke he has to do something about his father. In the end, that something was more uplifting than lopping his head off. It was the redemption arc to a story we were not told yet. But it was all made right with the galaxy as the Empire was defeated. Again, and finally. And we Star Wars fans immediately wanted more. Silly us. We didn't know it would be almost 2 decades before we would be given more. In the interim, we went a little mad, having to make do with the aforementioned books and the occasional comic book run put together by Marvel or one of the independents, and video or tabletop games. When it was announced that there would be a remastered extended cut of the original trilogy released in 1997, I, like most other Star Wars fans, could not wait to flood to the theater and see them. Star Wars, and it was called Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi on the big screen was probably my best movie-going experience until the release of The Lord of the Rings a few years later. We yearned always for more, and it added to the nerd debate that always surrounded Star Wars, that many non-nerds took for aggression and toxic masculinity. Who shot first being the most hotly debated point, especially after George Lucas, in a fit of revisionism, seemed to forget who Han Solo was before he met Luke and Leia, and had Greedo shoot first in the new version. It became the prime example for why buying physical media is a good idea. You never know when a creator will go back and change things on you in the age of digital. Or the corporation they sell their IP to might do the same for more sinister reasons. In 1999, we finally got more. Knew more. As we did 2 years earlier, Star Wars fans rushed to the theaters multiple times. But there was disquiet in the fandom. The Phantom Menace did not live up to our expectations. Don't get me wrong, the Space Wizards were doing Space Wizard stuff. The space battles looked great. We got to see new worlds and new peoples and new technologies and new vehicles. But Jar Jar. Jar Jar f***ing Binks was so f***ing annoying. And there was entirely too much Senate and Council in the damn movie. If we wanted to watch politics, we could stay home and watch C-SPAN coverage of Congress or Prime Minister's questions from Britain. But it was Star Wars. And maybe George was rusty. Unlike the morons in Hollywood today, George made us wait 3 years for the next movie, building our urgency for more. Unlike the business illiterates running things today, there was an understanding that absence made the fandom rabid. It was 2002 and we got ourselves geared up once more for Star Wars. Attack of the Clones this time. And this was much better. Less Jar Jar, less politics, but it was still lacking. The CGI effects were noticeable and not great in a lot of places. The love story between what used to be a little kid and the now Senator Padme Amidala was more than a little creepy. Some of the dialogue was on the terrible side. However, the Space Wizards were even better this time around, building to the battle between Yoda and Count Dooku, which was fucking awesome. And the story was much improved as they began tying it to the original trilogy in a more concrete manner. Overall, it was looking up as we ramped up our excitement for the last movie. Another 3 long years passed, and 2005 finally arrived. And the title of the final installment of the prequel trilogy was promising, Revenge of the Sith. It was suitably sinister for what promised to be the last chapter in the birth of Darth Vader and the fall of the Republic. The opening space battle was thrilling and epic. The infiltration of Obi-Wan and Anakin into Count Dooku's ship was exciting, and the opening lightsaber battle lived up to the ones that preceded it. Why Dooku didn't rat out Palpatine as the big bad was a bit of a plot hole, but never mind. We were moving, and Anakin had taken the next big step down the path to the dark side. What followed was a seduction worthy of 2 of the greatest villains in cinematic history, as Palpatine led Anakin off his path as the savior of the Jedi, and onto the path as their destruction. The fight between Yoda and Palpatine was on the disappointing side, especially after Yoda's fight with Dooku in the preceding film. But Anakin and Obi-Wan made up for it on Mustafar, and all of it was undone by the how of Padme's death near the very end of the movie. She just gives the fuck up? Are you fucking serious, George? But never mind, it was still a damn good movie, even if the ending did leave a slightly sour taste in our mouths and brains, which festered for the next damn long decade. In between, Disney plunks down a sack of money on George Lucas's desk and asks for Lucasfilm. Bob Iger wanted into the boys' entertainment and merchandising market, and Disney was not creative enough to do it in-house. Since it was a damn large sack of money, George said, "Sure, I like money." And for a second, I was hopeful this meant more Star Wars, maybe even better Star Wars given the amount of money Disney had to play with. Almost immediately, however, An uneasy stirring niggled my brain. Disney was a girls and kids brand. Star Wars was a boys and adults brand. But never mind. It'll be fine, I told myself. Also in the interim, Hollywood increasingly seemed to have lost their minds. More and more, male characters were only shown as incompetent, corrupt, moronic, or evil. Every sitcom dad was an idiot. Every male in commercials was unable to function without a woman to come show him how things needed to be fixed. Male action heroes and drama leads no longer seemed to be able to do their thing without a hyper-competent female to be there to bail them out at the critical juncture of the story. Demographics became more and more the focus when casting decisions were made. When 2015 arrived, fans of Star Wars were interested to see what Disney had for us, as The Force Awakens was presented by Jar Jar Abrams. J.J. Abrams. And I liked it on first viewing. However, like Revenge of the Sith, it left me uneasy as I left the theater. First and foremost was the fact that J.J. Abrams had taken the original Star Wars story and merely changed names, places, a few events, gender swapped, and came up with his story. It was derivative as hell. Second, Leia and Han were separated due to reasons? And they were never on screen with Luke together. Third, Finn was there merely for comic relief. That is what the droids are for. Fourth, Leia and Han's son was a temper tantrum throwing psycho who idolized Darth Vader. He was clearly a grown-ass man, but acted like a spoiled 3-year-old. Fifth, Rey was using the Force at a fairly high level before the credits rolled without a single second of mentoring. Sixth, Han f***ing Solo, the second coolest character in all of Star Wars, went out like a punk-ass bitch by his own son's hand. Now, I know Han and Leia's kid went bad in the books that Disney and Kathleen Kennedy decanonized, but this is not what any of us fans were expecting. Having him take out his father in the dumbest way possible didn't make it any better. And seventh, and I only cut myself off there because this isn't really a review, Snoke and the whole First Order were retarded. From Kylo Ren's violent tantrums to General Hux's clear narcissistic incompetence to Snoke's inability to enforce the kind of discipline that so marked the Empire's officers and personnel, it was all retarded. In the Empire, such tantrums and insubordination and incompetence would have been met with a force choke. Also, the sheer amount of resources needed to carve out a planet and turn it into a Death Star would have been insane. Nobody noticed that much activity / pillaging / purchasing before it became a problem? Really? Then again, in Disney Star Wars, the New Republic is run by incompetence and the corrupt, as they show us later on Disney+. Also, where were the First Order Star Destroyers protecting Starkiller Base? Another sign of creative bankruptcy, by the way. Absolutely stupid name. All that was protecting their secret base that probably took them decades to finish and untold fortunes to finance were some TIE fighters and a few surface guns. Really? But this was a first run for Disney. It was good enough. And Luke would be back in the next one. Surely that meant it had to be great, right? We would get to see peak Master Luke training the next generation of Jedi. Right? Right? The more I thought on The Force Awakens, the more uneasy I got. Then 2017 arrived. J.J. Abrams had delegated directing and writing duties to someone called Rian Johnson. He had a fairly good reputation in the press, so this should be fine. Had I checked his filmography at the time, I probably would have been more worried than I was going into the theater to watch The Last Jedi. Actually, I should have known by the title that this was not going to be good. The Last Jedi seemed to indicate that something somewhere went horribly awry in the writing process. I should have known something dumb was coming. I did not have long to wait. As the theater dimmed and the scrawl began to the resounding music of the legendary John Williams, I had goosebumps, as I always did for the beginning of Star Wars. And then the movie started. Were there no people with a modicum of brains on that set to tell Rian Johnson this was some seriously retarded shit? Bombs in fucking space. And then the First Order is following them through hyperspace by magic? The Force? What? Then we get a demonstration of toxic leadership from not only Holdo, but Leia too. What the hell is even going on? All the while, Rey is being introduced to old man Luke. That wasn't even Luke. That whole part of the movie was brain dead, including the force entanglement Snoke supposedly used to give Rey and Kylo alone time together. Exactly how did he do that, having never met Rey? And Snoke shows just how bad a villain he is by joining Han Solo in the killed like a punk-ass bitch category when Kylo Ren cuts him in half. By that point, I think my brain was punch-drunk with the stupid because I just sat there and took the hits. Mary Poppins Leia, okay. Death Star's siege cannon, whatever. Crystal Foxes leading the idiots out, sure. Luke projecting light years away via the Force, faux fighting Kylo and then dying of Force overdose. If you say so. I think that was where my Star Wars fanness died, looking back. It was already weakened by The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, the end of Revenge of the Sith, and the derivative nature of The Force Awakens. But The Last Jedi was too much stupid, malicious character destruction, imbecilic world warping, and needless and careless canon obliteration to withstand. Disney and Kathleen Kennedy had killed my oldest love. Not only did they kill it, they did it in front of me with a smile on their faces while telling me I don't like what they're doing because I am a bigot and a misogynist. I think The Last Jedi was the straw that broke this camel's back and opened its eyes while doing so. Does that mean I skipped The Rise of Skywalker? No, but denial is like that. You want to believe what you love is still alive, still salvageable. After all, they got J.J. Abrams to come back for it. Maybe he can redeem his mistakes in the first film and fix the abomination that Rian Johnson created with the second. And he did try, sort of. However, J.J. Abrams is not nearly as smart, talented, and creative as his fans and he seem to think he is. If he were, The Rise of Skywalker would have been a smarter, more thought out, and better written movie. And it would not have been titled The Rise of Skywalker. The Last Jedi was a deliberate destruction of the Star Wars franchise by an imbecile who is far too in love with his own meager talent, thereby inflating his self-image of that talent and its abilities. 2019's The Rise of Skywalker was an incompetent patch job done by someone who neither cared how bad that patch job was, nor wanted to listen to anyone telling him the shit-stained canvas he was proudly presenting as art was nothing but excrement smeared on a wall. I would love to go through what was wrong with it briefly, as I did the other movies, but I honestly would have trouble stopping once I start. But let's just hit a couple of the more retarded points, like a cavalry charge on a Star Destroyer in f***ing space, or the jangling keys of Lando Calrissian, the coolest character in Star Wars, being used like a prop to tempt Star Wars fans into liking the movie, or kicking the movie off with the resurrection of Palpatine, sort of. Or Rey ending the movie by calling herself a Skywalker before squatting in Luke's old home on Tatooine. The rise of Palpatine was just one stupid point after another, each seemingly dumber than the last. It was also what made me sure that Star Wars was dead. The series after series on Disney Plus is merely the defilement of the corpse. Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau evinced glimmers of hope in Season 1 of The Mandalorian, but it has since shown that no, that was just Disney reanimating the corpse before another round of molestation by the cultural vandals. The series that followed it, as well as the latter seasons of The Mandalorian, demonstrated rather conclusively that yes, Star Wars is well and truly dead. Not only dead, but likely beyond resurrection anytime soon. At least by the people running Lucasfilm and Disney and all of the people they have brought into those companies. No, it will take time away from the disappointed, angry, and apathetic eyes of fans on the big and small screens, as well as a truly talented creative who is a fan of pre-Disney Star Wars to attempt to resurrect the franchise. And even then, not all fans will return. The fandom has been that damaged by Disney and Kathleen Kennedy. And no, a modern audience is not out there waiting to discover the dried, crusted pile of bantha dung that is Star Wars, lifting it back to the glory of its heyday. That is the delusion of the creatively bankrupt brainlets who have shat out load after load of excrement and tried to call it Star Wars. Anyway, that is where I am vis-a-vis Star Wars. Let me know in the comments if you share my sentiment or if you think I got something wrong. Share the video and subscribe to the channel, and until next time, tschüss.